Okay, everybody, today we're going to be learning about the Louisiana Purchase. And for that, what we're going to be doing is actually reading through a skit. Now, this is one of those lessons that's unfortunate that we can't all be together today for me to go through this with you because I was planning on assigning you roles and letting you guys do some acting out. Um, Unfortunately, since we can't all be together today, what I thought I would do is still go through this with you. I'm gonna let the computer do a little bit of the reading, and I'll do a little bit of it as well, and just kind of introducing you to some different things. So, on this Google Classroom post, please take a look at the Louisiana Purchase skit, and your document should look just like this. So here are the characters that you're going to be hearing from in this skit. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States. Meriwether Lewis, which is Jefferson's private secretary. Robert Livingston, the United States ambassador to France. Mrs. Livingston, which is Robert Livingston's wife. The maid, which is just a French helper to the Livingston family. Servant, which is a French diplomatic aide. Charles Talleyrand, the French diplomat, and just so you know, a diplomat is a negotiator between countries, and you're going to see several of those or hear from several of those in today's screen recording. Francois, the French servant. James Monroe, a U.S. ambassador to France. An ambassador is just a go-between between two different countries. Francois Barbé Marbeau. No, it's not Barbie, though a lot of kids seem to think that it's Barbie. Barbé Marbeau is the Minister of French Finance, so someone who is in tune with the financial dealings of the French people. Denis Decrès is the Minister of the French Navy, so a naval officer. Messenger is a French dispatcher, someone who takes messages from one place to another. Napoleon Bonaparte, the French military dictator. And narrators 1 through 10 are going to be just our storytellers for today. You don't need to worry about the reminders because this is going to be read to you. You can follow along as we go through right here. And this should basically just take us through lots of the different parts of this skit. I'm going to let the computer do a number of the pieces of talking, but then at the end of each scene, I will try to recap a little bit about what we heard, what we learned. And so just do your best you can to follow along. Just so you guys know as well, if you go to Google and you type in text-to-speech, because this is a good resource for you to have, the one I like to use is this naturalreaders.com. From there, all you need to do is you copy in the information, you paste it into here, and then this will read the whole thing out loud to you. And you can stop it, you can pause at any time, you can even choose your person's voice that you want to hear it from. They can have different accents or even in different languages. My personal favorite is Ryan's voice in the English. Of course, we're not going to be reading in Spanish, although something you might want to tell your Spanish teacher about, who knows. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into this. And again, at the end of each scene, I'll kind of discuss some things for you. I may even interrupt them occasionally as well. So here we go with scene 1.
Scene 1, Jefferson and Lewis planned the expedition, 1803. Ner. 1, on the American side of the stage, Thomas.
It's narrator. Thanks, Ryan.
Ner. 1, on the American side of the stage, Thomas Jefferson is sitting at a desk writing with a quill pen. He looks up when a knock is heard on the door. Jefferson, come in. The door is open. Lewis enters. Meriwether. How good to see you. Lewis, I don't want to disturb you, Mr. President. Jefferson, not at all. Please sit down. What is on your mind? Lewis sits down in a chair beside Jefferson's desk. Sir, I am deeply honored that I have been chosen to lead a Western expedition. It has been a dream of mine for a very long time. However, once we cross the Mississippi River, we will be on foreign soil. I was wondering whether that soil now belongs to Spain or to France? Jefferson smiles. You must have heard the rumor that Napoleon has taken back Louisiana from Spain. Lewis, yes, sir. Several days ago, in fact. Jefferson, I do not know for certain, Meriwether, but I greatly fear the rumor is true. We know for a fact that Napoleon is now sending troops to the Caribbean islands. Lewis, do you think he is planning to make a comeback in North America? Jefferson, I'm not sure what he is up to, but he certainly seems interested in this part of the world all of a sudden. One would think he has more than enough to occupy himself in Europe. He has subdued one European country after another with his constant wars. Lewis, if the rumor is true that France now owns Louisiana, how will it affect the Western expedition? Jefferson, as far as I am concerned, Meriwether, it will not affect it at all. We will do what we must do. I strongly believe the Louisiana Territory will become part of the United States someday. Therefore, we must go forward with our plans to explore it regardless of who owns it. Lewis, I am happy to hear that, sir. Jefferson smiles. I thought you would be. And now let us change the subject and discuss plans for the expedition. Before you leave, you must be prepared to gather scientific information and respond to medical emergencies on the trail. So I am arranging for you to go to Philadelphia for a few weeks to study with some of America's foremost doctors and scientists. Lewis, Mr. President, I am extremely pleased. When do I leave? Jefferson, I will let you know as soon as I have completed the arrangements. Rises, right now I want you to come with me to my library. I have an interesting map to show you that has recently come into my possession. Jefferson and Lewis exit. Number 1. So Lewis got ready and left on the run. But Jefferson's problems had only begun. The schemes that Napoleon set into motion were having effect on this side of the ocean. Frontier farmers shipped produce like cotton and beans down the Great River to Port New Orleans. But the governor there said, "Don't send any more." And the farmers replied, "You know this means war." Number 2, but war against whom? With France or with Spain? Just who was in charge there? Which one stood to gain? Though King Charles of Spain had really begun it, the farmers were certain Napoleon had done it. Then Jefferson wrote to his envoy in France, "If we go to war now, we haven't a chance. So this above all, we will send you the means. Make them an offer to buy New Orleans." Scene 2, Ambassador Livingston.
Okay, so before we head into scene 2, kind of setting the stage here for the first scene for you have President Thomas Jefferson sending Meriwether Lewis to Louisiana to explore. So the idea here is Louisiana wasn't just where the state of Louisiana is now. It was most everything basically west of the Mississippi River. The United States had some parts of east of the Mississippi River. In fact, lots of them east of the Mississippi, but everything pretty much west of the Mississippi was unclaimed land, at least as far as the United States was concerned. A lot of Native Americans living out there. And at this point in history, west of the Mississippi, west of this Louisiana area, Louisiana Territory was owned by the nation of France. So the idea here is Jefferson just wants to send Meriwether Lewis to go explore there and see what the area has to offer. Scene number 2, here we go.
Scene 2, Ambassador Livingston in Paris, 1803. Number 2, Ambassador Robert Livingston is seated beside a table that is stacked with books and papers. His wife, Mary, is seated across from him. He is holding an unopened letter, and she is reading a book. Livingston turns the letter over in his hands. "I do hope there will be a faster way to communicate across the Atlantic someday. This letter from Jefferson was written 6 weeks ago." Opens the letters and begins to read silently. "Oh dear, dear me." Mrs. Livingston puts down her book. "What is it, Robert?" Livingston, "The Spanish commandant at New Orleans has revoked the right of deposit. American farmers will no longer be allowed to store their products at New Orleans before shipping them out on ocean-going vessels. The frontier is in an uproar and some congressmen are urging Jefferson to declare war." Mrs. Livingston, "Against Spain?" Livingston, "No. Against France." Mrs. Livingston, "What? I thought Spain owned New Orleans." "You said the Spanish commandant closed the port." Livingston, "The Spanish are still managing New Orleans, but there are good reasons to believe it now belongs to France. Word has slipped out that France recently negotiated a secret treaty with Spain to take it back. At any rate, the frontier farmers are blaming Napoleon and calling for a war against France." Begins reading the letter again silently. Mrs. Livingston, looking startled, "Oh dear, What a dreadful prospect to be in France if we should go to war with them. Livingston, stay calm, Mary. Points to the letter. Jefferson does not want war, and he will do everything in his power to prevent it. Although he believes Napoleon had no part in closing the port of New Orleans, this incident makes him realize that America must own New Orleans. Certainly, I will do everything I can to make that happen. Mrs. Livingston, what does Mr. Jefferson want you to do about it, Robert? Livingston, Leanne's closer. This is for your ears only, Mary, but he wants me to buy New Orleans from the French. Mrs. Livingston, buy New Orleans? Can you do that? Livingston, yes, I think it's possible. Over the past few months I have come to know Napoleon and many of the people around him. I believe I can accomplish this. In the meantime, I want you to enjoy your life here. Believe me, we are in no danger. Leanne's back in his chair and changes the subject. Tell me, what have you been doing today to occupy your time? Mrs. Livingston, oh, shopping, having tea. There is always a social event of some kind going on here.
So Robert Livingston's, trying to figure out if he's going to buy an entire city, and meanwhile his wife's out shopping and having a tea. So they're both having a really good time here in France.
Mrs. Livingston, oh, shopping, having tea. There is always a social event of some kind going on here. Taps her forehead as if remembering something. Oh, my goodness. Speaking of social events, Robert, we received an invitation by special messenger just this morning to a reception at Napoleon's palace. I know it will be elegant. The French entertain so graciously. A knock sounds at the door and a maid enters. Maid, carteing, madam, monsieur, dinner is served. Exits. Mrs. Livingston, come along, Robert. Livingston rises and turns to the audience. Yes, the French do entertain graciously, but I wonder if they will be so gracious at the bargaining table? He takes her arm and they exit together. Nur. 3. Meanwhile, back in Washington, Jefferson was nettled. He wanted this matter of New Orleans settled. He called on a statesman and friend, James Monroe, and told him to Paris, I'd like you to go to help Robert Livingston finish the pact. A delicate job to be handled with tact. So Monroe sailed away upon a fast vessel, Nur. 4, while Livingston daily continued to wrestle with letters and meetings and problems to handle. The way he was treated was really a scandal. Napoleon's minister, Monsieur Talleyrand, acted and spoke in a manner most grand.
Talleyrand.
Acted and spoke in a manner most grand. Napoleon, too, kept him waiting and stewing, and Livingston never knew what they were doing. Scene 3.
Before we head to scene 3, so what the United States wants here is they want to buy the entire city of New Orleans. It was a major port city right along the Mississippi, and so Jefferson really wants, in this case, Robert Livingston, to go and to try to buy this from France, because it could be a major development for the United States if they had this big port city in order to ship goods out, in order to move people different places, and also it could potentially open up the West for the United States. So Livingston's going to try to buy New Orleans from the French. That's kind of what his job, his role is as he's in Paris. So here we go with scene number 3. You're going to see Livingston meet with one of the French officials here.
Scene 3. Livingston meets with Talleyrand. Nur. 4. A table and 2 chairs are placed on the French side of the stage. A bell rings and a servant enters and answers the door. Servant. Ah, Monsieur Livingston. Come in, please. Monsieur Talleyrand is expecting you. Please wait here and I will inform him that you have arrived. Livingston enters, the servant leaves, and Livingston sits down to wait. After a few seconds he stands up and begins to pace. Livingston, muttering, "This is ridiculous after all, he asked me to come here. I know he makes me wait just to prove how powerful he is." While Livingston's back is turned, Talleyrand comes in, leaning heavily on a cane. Talleyrand, ahem. Livingston turns around quickly. Livingston, oh, Monsieur Talleyrand. I didn't hear you come in. Talleyrand, perhaps you were not expecting me so soon, Monsieur Livingston. Laughs and sits down. Please sit. I have been walking in the garden, such a pleasant day. Livingston, yes, quite. But but I am sure you have not asked me here to discuss the weather. Your message seemed urgent. Tolerant. Perhaps urgent is too strong a word. However, I do need to speak with you, off the record, shall we say? You see, I have been thinking about your mission to my country to buy New Orleans. Pauses, but why stop there? It is only a small part of an immense area. Livingston, what do you have in mind, Monsieur Tolerant? Tolerant puts his fingertips together and speaks casually. Monsieur Livingston, would the United States be interested in buying all of Louisiana? Livingston swallows hard in surprise, but tries to maintain his composure. No, I don't think so. We wish only to acquire New Orleans and West Florida. Tolerant, but if France gives up those places, the rest of Louisiana will be of little value to us. So you see, I was just wondering what your country would give for the whole? Livingston, to tell you the truth, sir, this is a subject I have not thought about, but I suppose we might give 20 million francs.
So Livingston here is basically telling Talleyrand, wait a second, you're offering me not just New Orleans, you're offering me all of Louisiana, which again, guys, this isn't just the state of Louisiana, this is basically all land west of the Mississippi. This is a massive, massive piece of what is now the United States. And so Livingston just kind of off the cuff says, I don't know, maybe we'll give you 20 million francs, which basically $20 million. And let's see what Talleyrand has to say.
Talleyrand smiles. Monsieur Livingston, I'm sure you know that is much too low. Perhaps you would like to reflect upon the matter for a time, but don't tarry too long. Rises from his chair with the help of his cane. Livingston rises too. I believe our business is over for today, monsieur. Let me see you to the door. When they reach the door, Talleyrand puts his hand on Livingston's arm. Please understand, I am not speaking from authority on the matter of selling Louisiana. The idea just struck me and I thought I would pass it on to you. Livingston, I will remember that. Good day, sir. They both exit. Ner. 4. At last Monroe got there, but it hadn't been easy. The long stormy sea voyage had made him feel queasy. But when he arrived, he got a new shock. What Livingston said to him made his mind rock.
Okay, so this whole scene 3, we hear Livingston and Talleyrand, so Livingston from America, Talleyrand from France, and they're negotiating. You know, Livingston says, hey, I want to buy Louisiana, or specifically, not Louisiana, I should say, I want to buy New Orleans, Louisiana, and Talleyrand says, well, if you're going to buy that, why don't you just buy everything? It's kind of like walking into a store and saying, well, I want to buy a new television, and then the salesperson tries to sell you, well, why don't you get a whole new entertainment system, speakers, video game system, surround sound, like all the bells and whistles. And so that's kind of what's happening here. So Livingston's kind of surprised and not sure what to do. And so here we go with scene number 4.
Scene 4. Livingston stuns Monroe with amazing news. 1803. Ner. 5. Ambassador Monroe is slumped in a chair wearing a dressing gown. He is holding his head in his hands as if in pain. A French servant, Francois, Franz Washington, enters carrying a tea service on a tray. Francois pours a cup of tea and hands it to Monroe. Your tea, sir. Monroe, looking up and taking the teacup. Oh, thank you. Francois takes a sip. Perhaps this will improve my outlook. Francois, the trip from America, it was very tiring, n'est-ce pas? N'est-ce pas, is it not so?
That's
Monroe,
what n'est-ce pas means.
Yes, Francois, very tiring a month at sea. And the weather was beastly. There is a knock at the door. Francois, please see who is calling and make my apologies. I am really in no condition to receive guests this morning. Francois, very good, sir. Goes to the door. Ambassador Livingston. Bonjour. Bonjour. Good day. Livingston. Bonjour, Francois. I must see Mr. Monroe immediately. Francois, Mr. Monroe regrets that he is not receiving guests this morning, sir. Livingston, but I must see him, if only for a few minutes. Monroe calls to Francois. It is all right, Francois. Show Mr. Livingston in. Francois steps aside and Livingston hurries into the room. Thank you, Francois. That will be all for the present. Francois exits. Livingston, Monroe starts to rise. Please, don't get up. I am sorry to trouble you so early in the day, but this cannot wait. Early this week I was called to the office of that dreadful foreign minister, Talleyrand. As we were discussing the purchase of New Orleans, he suddenly asked me a most amazing question. He said, "What would you give for the whole?" Monroe, for the whole? Did he mean the whole of Louisiana? Livingston, yes, that is exactly what he meant. Monroe, I am stunned. What did you say? Livingston, I told him that I had not thought of such a thing and, even if I had, I did not have the authority to make such a purchase. I said that I had to speak with you. Later that evening, I was contacted by Napoleon's Minister of Finance, Barbe my Boyce. He informed me that Napoleon had placed him in charge of the negotiations instead of Talleyrand. Monroe, does that mean Talleyrand was bluffing? Livingston, it would be very like him to do that. However, I trust Barbe my Boyce, and he assures me that Napoleon really is ready to sell the whole of Louisiana. It seems Napoleon's plans for regaining a foothold in North America are not going well. However, he may change his mind if we delay too long. Monroe, getting further instructions from President Jefferson is out of the question, isn't it? Livingston, yes, I am afraid so. It is up to us to make the decision. Both men are silent for a few seconds. Monroe looks up and speaks quietly. What do you think we should do? Livingston, I think we must proceed. We must negotiate for the whole New Orleans, the Floridas, and the Louisiana Territory. Such an opportunity as this will never come again. Monroe ponders silently for a moment. I agree. Will you tell Barbe my Boyce that we wish to open negotiations as soon as possible? Livingston, I will see to it immediately. Stands and prepares to leave. I do hope your health improves very quickly. Monroe, thank you. Stands and shakes hands with Livingston. I will see you to the door. They both exit. N.5. Napoleon had reasons for wanting to sell, which neither ambassador understood well. They suspected Napoleon's plans were in trouble. N.6. That his scheme for the Indies had burst like a bubble. That in spite of his bluster, his boldness, and show, his dreams of world conquest were being brought low.
So scene number 4 is all about this conversation between Livingston and Monroe. Livingston likes the idea, but also wants to run it by Monroe, that he knows this is a huge purchase that they'd be undertaking. He wants to make sure that it's going to be okay with Jefferson. So he broaches the idea with Monroe, and Monroe totally agrees. He said, I think this is a great deal. I think we need to pursue this. I think we need to look into it. Keep in mind, they couldn't just contact Thomas Jefferson. You know, when I'm out and about, if I'm at the store, or you guys know I love going to flea markets, you know, if I have a question of, hey, you know, I wonder if my wife wants this, I don't have to buy it on the spot and hope it works out okay. What I do often is I'll take a picture and text it to her, or I'll call her, or I'll FaceTime her, or I'll do something so she can kind of see what I'm doing. Guys, this is the 1800s. This is 1803. They can't just call Thomas Jefferson. They can't just FaceTime him. They can't tweet him. They can't contact him in a moment's notice. And so there was no contacting him. And so basically Livingston and Monroe are going to have to make this decision for themselves and, you know, trust that Jefferson's going to believe that that was the right decision. So you can tell they're excited about this, but at the same time, you know, they want to make sure that they do something that they're allowed to do and that they don't anger Jefferson, who's, you know, their boss and the president of the United States. For me, you know, them having this type of an offer, you guys, like I said, know that I like to do my flea markets and my card shows and stuff like that. This is me walking by a table and seeing a great deal and, you know, on one thing, and then the person says, well, why don't you just buy the whole thing? Why don't you just buy my entire table out? And it's still a really good deal. Now, it might be a lot of money, but it's still something that I'm going to make profit off from. So kind of the same thing happening here in the United States. Livingston and Monroe realize this could be a big, big deal for the entire country if they can pull this off. Scene number 5.
Scene 5. Napoleon and ministers debate selling Louisiana, 1803. N.6. Napoleon sits slumped at a table, looking glum. Sitting at opposite ends of the table are the Minister of Finance, Barbe my Boyce, and the Minister of the Navy, Dennis Deckers. Napoleon straightens up in his chair. Gentlemen, I know the two of you disagree on what to do about the Louisiana Territory. I want to hear both of your arguments, and then I will decide whether to keep it or sell it to the Americans. nods to Deckers. Go ahead. Deckers, with all due respect, sir, I believe it would be a great pity to give up such a vast and important land. Although it may be a wilderness now, it is overflowing with valuable resources for future development. Also, the Louisiana Territory is the last major remnant of the French colonial empire. Little by little, the British are stripping us of our colonies all over the world. I beg you, sir, do not let this last great possession slip from our grasp. Napoleon nods to Barbe, my boys, and you, sir. What do you advise? Barbe, my boys, my advice is to sell it, all of it. Even though we are now at peace with the British, I fear that war in Europe will come again soon. If that happens, we cannot afford to defend a vast territory thousands of miles away from home, much less colonize and develop it. Napoleon, and if war does not come, Barbe, my boys, I still say we must sell it. France has tried for 2 centuries to colonize the Louisiana Territory without success. Even our latest efforts to take back the Caribbean islands have ended in tragedy. The slaves there have resisted fiercely and many of our troops have died from yellow fever. Puts his hand over his mouth in embarrassment. Oh, I am sorry, sir. I forgot that your brother-in-law, General Leclerc, died there from the terrible disease. Napoleon frowns and turns his face away. At least, my dear sister Pauline survived. But let us leave this matter of Louisiana for the present and get some rest. I am weary and I can make no decision tonight. Both ministers stand, bow slightly, and leave the room. Napoleon paces for the moment, then lies down upon the couch to sleep. Shortly afterward there is a knock on the door, and Napoleon sits up. Napoleon, who is it? Messenger's voice. A messenger, sir, with urgent dispatches. Napoleon leaps out of bed and goes to the door where a dispatch bag is handed to him. Please wait. Napoleon takes the dispatches from the bag and looks them over quickly. Messenger, summon Minister Barbe, my boys, at once. Ner. 7. The actors pantomime the actions as spoken by the narrator in this segment. Napoleon, wearing a dressing gown, is pacing with a sheaf of papers in his hand. Marbois enters and Napoleon hands him the papers. Marbois glances over them. Early next day in the dawn's fading gloom, Napoleon ordered Marbois to his room. He'd received some dispatches sent straight from his spies, reporting that Britain was ready to rise, to challenge Napoleon's threat to their shores, and meet him in battle to settle old scores. Barbe, my boys, it seems very clear from these dispatches, sir, that the British have no intention of honoring the terms of our recent peace treaty. Without doubt, they are making preparations for war. Barbe, my boys, hands the dispatches back to Napoleon, who angrily wads them up and throws them on the floor.
Well, I'm not going to upgrade, so here I go with the rest of it for you guys. You guys get to listen to me now. Napoleon turns to the audience. Very well. If war is what they want, we shall give it to them. I can hesitate no longer about my new world possessions. My mind is made up. We need money to fight the British. I renounce Louisiana. It is not only New Orleans that I cede, meaning that I give it up. It is the whole colony. So he's going to give up not just New Orleans, but all land west of the Mississippi River. We must begin negotiations with the Americans this very day. Come, we have work to do. The wheels started turning that very same day to settle the question of how much to pay for a vast tract of land, and New Orleans too. Then France finally said $15 million would do. So we pay the French $15 million for all land west of the Mississippi River that the French owned, which included the city of New Orleans. If you go to a quick Google image search and we go to Louisiana Purchase, guys, and we look at the actual images, I want you to look at just how much land was owned by the French when we purchased this. Let's see if I can find the picture. I thought I had it there. Let's see if we can bring up just the photo itself. There we are. So you get the idea here. We purchased all this different land that was owned by the French. I mean, this is a massive plot of land. I mean, it literally doubles the United States in size. What's funny about this $15 million is that you originally heard The Americans offering the French, I don't know, maybe 20 million, and then they pay less. Again, this is like me going to a card show or a flea market and someone saying, well, how much do you give me for it? And I'm like, I'll give you $20. And they go, well, I'll take 15 instead. I mean, this was an incredible deal. Think of how much actual space, how many states that fills up in today's world. It's so many states and parts of states, it's almost too many to count quickly anyway. So you get the idea, like this is a massive plot of land that we get. Through long days debating conditions and prices, at last they were nearing the end of the crisis. On the last day of April in 1803, the purchase was finally a fait accompli. In French, that means something that's over and done. In this case, it meant that the United States had won. A huge tract of land that doubled its size with the stroke of a pen, we, the United States, had gained a great prize. Again, doubling the United States with this $15 million purchase. But wait just a moment, it wasn't done yet. No one in America knew, don't forget. How the public would take it was still a big worry, so Livingston sent a dispatch, basically sent a message in a hurry. As fortune would have it, I tell you no lie, Thomas Jefferson got it the 3rd of July. So scene 5 is all about this actual transaction taking place. You saw Napoleon asking his advisors, Marbeau and Decrès, what they wanted to do. Decrès, the naval officer, said, no, I don't want to sell it. It's too good of a piece of land. You need to keep it. You need to colonize it. You need to develop it. We need to keep this in French hands. Marbeau, on the other hand, keep in mind, his role is the French financial advisor, and he wants to make sure Napoleon has more money. Napoleon decides to go with what Marbeau says and to sell it because he wants money to fight against the British. Keep in mind, at this point in American history, or in world history, I should say, the British and the French definitely were at odds with one another constantly. And so with the French selling us this plot of land that they may or may not have eventually used, it definitely gave France more money to play with when they would need it for their wars with the British. So that was kind of Napoleon's rationale in selling it, is he thought, well, I'm going to need this money to fight a war, and so it's justified that I'm going to end up selling this land to the Americans. A lot of people think, too, well, if he wouldn't have sold it to us, what would have happened? Potentially we could have fought a war with France as well, but that's avoided here because we, instead of fighting someone for it, we literally pay him $15 million. And when you think about all the land that we gained for $15 million, this is one of the great deals in U.S. history. Scene number 6, Jefferson gets the good news. This is our last scene here. James Madison, Secretary of State, and President Jefferson are seated in Jefferson's office. James Madison, today is July 3rd, 1803. What a wonderful time to receive these exciting dispatches. The Louisiana Territory and New Orleans are now a part of this great nation we have struggled so long to create. Yes, my friend, tomorrow is the 27th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Truly, we have lived through momentous times. Of course, there still are obstacles to overcome. The treaty has to be ratified by the Senate and the funds approved for the purchase. True, but I believe that will be done quickly. Most of the senators and other statesmen with whom I have spoken are enthused and delighted. Naturally, a few of your political enemies are raising a big fuss about whether the purchase is constitutional. Some people wondered, well, the Constitution doesn't say that the President in the United States can go out buying land. Jefferson's response to that was, well, I never said that I couldn't go and do that. That is to be expected. I myself had some reservations on that issue, but the importance of adding this enormous territory to America outweighs all other doubts. Well, Mr. President, I must leave you to your duties and get back to my own. Thank you for the important part you played in Louisiana Purchase as Secretary of State. I'll walk you to the door. When the news reached the people out on the frontier, there were grand celebrations and shouts of good cheer. Way out in St. Louis, all set to embark on their great expedition, were Lewis and Clark. On the day of the transfer of power was made, the flags of the Spanish and French were displayed. Then both were retired in orderly manner, and up went America's Star-Spangled Banner, which actually wasn't even written yet. We'll talk more about that later this unit. So Jefferson really did wrestle with this decision, even though it was such a good deal. He kind of, like I mentioned, said that, well, the Constitution didn't say that I could purchase this, but it also didn't say that I couldn't. And so he decides to go ahead and do it because he says, you know what, it's such a good deal for the United States. As you can tell, Jefferson's happy, Madison's happy, and the United States was happy. I mean, we literally doubled, guys. We doubled the nation in size with this huge territorial expansion. So it ended up being a really good deal for the United States. In the coming days, we'll be learning about Lewis and Clark and how they go and explore this new purchase that we have made. Have a great rest of your day. Message me with any questions. See ya.